You are now listening to the Add 10 Gallons Concrete Podcast.
Wait, the answer was add 10 gallons?
Add 10 gallons.
My first thought was we got to put Actigel in this.
Dang right.
Truck's on the way.
On the way.
Yeah, okay. I've got two observations, neither of which are really educated or well thought out. Which are like most of my observations are.
There aren't a lot of problems on a job site that can't be solved with a sack full of biscuits.
Today's episode of the Add 10 Gallons Concrete Podcast is brought to you by Actigel 208. Actigel 208 is a high-performance additive for the concrete industry that is greatly beneficial to the producer. It enables them to increase the percentage of manufactured sand by up to 100% and completely replace all the natural sand in the mix. In areas where natural sand is scarce, inconsistent, and expensive, this provides a huge benefit to any ready-mix company out there. Benefits of manufactured sand and concrete include consistent air content, improved compaction, and increased density. Now, in the past, the downside of using manufactured sands was that they were hard to pump, hard to place, and hard to finish. Well, Actigel 208 solves all those issues. By improving suspension, stability, and the quality of the cement paste in the mix, Actigel overcomes the old issues with manufactured sand and leaves them behind. Let Actigel 208 improve the quality of your mix while saving money on every yard you produce. For more information, visit us at actigel.com. That's ACTI-GEL.com.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome into the Add 10 Gallons podcast. I am Josh Hare, joined by Paul Finley and Joey Bell. How you guys doing?
Doing good, brother. How are you?
Good, man. Joey, how you doing?
I'm doing excellent for a Monday.
Here you boys. Well, this is a special episode. It's our very first one. People who are listening in here, we appreciate you. We appreciate your attention, and know that moving forward, we're going to do our best to improve each and every episode and bring you, what's going on. We're going to have interesting guests that are talking concrete. We're going to talk shop. We're going to talk things that are industry related. We're going to talk about current events, things that are interesting to us, things that are interesting to the industry. And as big events in the industry come up, we'll talk about them as well. Speaking of events and stuff like that, guys, I got something I want to talk about here. The ACI Concrete Convention is officially moving to 100% online. They were going to have the convention this year in Raleigh, North Carolina, towards the end of October. It's now going to be 100% in your living room on your computer screen.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's not surprising by no means. And, we've talked in private through conversation how these webinars are becoming massively popular. Seek has done a number of them. Our guest on the show today, Ryan Betts, he's going to be doing one with Argos, and he can talk a little bit about that on the show as well. But, that's fine. Webinars are fine. Something just doesn't feel right about a convention being 100% online. I mean, the pro is you still get the benefit from all the information. They're going to have technical and educational sessions. They're still going to give out awards for top projects. They say that they're going to do virtual networking and special events. Okay.
It's going to be tough. I mean, that's part of networking. Shaking a man's hand.
Yeah.
That's part of it.
Yeah. I mean, I would say 80% of the benefit or why people go to these conventions is to do just that, shake hands and talk shop.
Well, and when you're in person, you get business cards. And as silly as that sounds, you meet so many people sometimes that when you get back, you're like, man, what was that guy's name? Oh, yeah, that's right. I got his card. You pull it up and you know where he is, got his contact information. That's going to be tough virtual. Hey, maybe they can do it, though. I mean, ACI's a bunch of smart people over there. I mean, they can figure it out.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
well,
the worst thing about just, Paul, like you said, conventions is forgetting people's names. And I forget people's names 10 seconds after they tell it to me. So I have to have a card. If you don't give me a business card, you basically don't exist. So I need those cards.
Yeah. I mean, how many times have you been in a meeting with multiple people and, you exchange business cards at the beginning of the meeting or presentation or whatever? I'll lay those business cards out in a way to where, like, I can reference those and know who I'm talking to.
It's like a seating chart.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know myself, and I know that in order for me to remember things, I got to write things down. And so in a meeting, when a guy tells me his name, right, I look at him and I write his name down on my agenda pad So I'm like, okay, that's this guy, this guy.
That's a
It
great
helps.
idea. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, we'll see how this goes. We'll see how the 100% digital convention goes, and hopefully, God willing, this is the only time it has to happen. I think if this becomes a thing where it happens perpetually, it can change. Like the format will change.
No way it does. No way it does.
Yeah.
I don't believe it. It's just COVID-19, and we're seeing that in our business. Like this past week, we just went to Chicago, did a bunch of work out there, and unfortunately, Joey couldn't join us.
Yeah.
The city of Chicago decided that residents from the state of Tennessee weren't going to be allowed in.
Mhm.
So, I get it. Just trying to keep people safe. I mean, I get it. And what more of a dangerous place to go than a convention where the entire thing is to be face to face within 6 feet of somebody shaking their hand.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a good way to spread germs. And in fact, that's how it got spread really bad in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
They actually had like a doctor's convention or something right at the start of like the COVID-19 outbreak. And so people were coming in from New York and San Francisco and places and came into Boston, and every single case, I'm pretty much, or like 99% of the cases that were in Massachusetts were all traced back to that one convention.
Yeah.
So I don't blame the ACI for going online. It's probably the smart thing.
Yeah, we had, you guys know I love to turkey hunt. I hunt all the time or whatever, but we had the National Wild Turkey Federation convention in Nashville right in the middle of February, which is, a few weeks before all this stuff kicked off. And I'm wondering if it's like what you just said, Paul, about I wonder how many cases could be traced from Nashville, because there were people flying for this thing, oddly enough, just for turkey hunting stuff. But there's 40, I know there were at least 40 or 50,000 people in Nashville at the Gaylord Opryland Convention Center in a weekend. So there's no telling how much of it was actually passed around then. And going back to the ACI thing, a lot of, I'm part of, or AMI is part of the American Shotcrete Association. I go to those meetings twice a year, or try to, and they usually meet on the weekend before, or the Saturday before the ACI convention. And I'm wondering, and I'm assuming now that it's all going to be webinars and stuff, but just like you guys said, there's so much that gets done in those little committee meetings, people sitting across the table from each other face to face. It's going to be completely different than trying to talk over people, on the webinar thing. And just even with you guys there in the studio and myself, here in Nashville, being remote and not face to face with you guys, the interaction is still going to be different. It'd be a lot better, of course, if we were all three in the same room together, but just the face to face interaction is so much better. And I'm hoping it doesn't stay that way, but it's just the times we're in right now.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I remember going all the way back, like 2008. We were in the CIM program at MTSU, me and you, Joey, and we flew out to Phoenix for the it was a precast pre-test show at that time. They had it combined. I don't know if it's still combined or not. But I remember going all the way out there, and we couldn't believe it. We're like, people actually have like a thing for precast concrete. We're going together and discuss it, and it was huge. It was unbelievable, and it's only gotten bigger every year since then.
Right.
So just knowing that and how eye-opening that was for us as young pups in the industry, we were super green. Everything we knew was in textbooks and a little bit in the lab. And to go out there and to see like, oh, okay, there's a lot to this. And this is just precast, pre-stress, which is what, 15% of the whole concrete market in the United States, maybe 20% at this point. So, I mean, it was hugely eye-opening, and it's very beneficial. So when you say like ACI is going online, it makes me think, one of the things that I think of because of my personal experience is there's going to be other young guys and young girls that aren't getting that introduction to the industry. Whether they're still in college like we were, or whether they're new to the industry and they're getting brought up and it's their chance to meet some really smart people. They're not getting that experience. It's not the same when you go on a webinar. And so I hope that we get back to a little bit of normalcy. I hope the new normal is not that we're doing webinar conferences, but I am glad the ACI is being safe and keeping people safe.
Yeah, no, they're doing the right thing for sure. And hopefully, things turn around and we can have in-person conventions and, things get back to the way they used to be here in short order, because in 2021, their next event after this one that was scheduled in Raleigh, the end of March 2021, I think it's the 28th to the April 1st, their location is the Baltimore Convention Center right here in our backyard.
Oh,
wow.
So hopefully this ship gets righted before that. That way we can make a little field trip from the office here down to the Inner Harbor, Baltimore, and
Yeah, see all our friends. So that means all our friends are coming to us now.
yeah, for once.
For once.
Well, hey, if you want to avoid COVID, go to outer space.
Yeah,
And that leads me into what I found.
what a segue.
Leads me to what I found. I found this pretty cool study. So I live in Pennsylvania. Our office is here in the Baltimore area, so I drive down here to be in the studio with you. But up in Pennsylvania, up at Penn State, they're doing some research. They're leading the way on this research about concrete hydration, concrete formation in outer space. That's really cool to me. I just think this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And so I'm a couple years late. They're actually just completed phase 2 of the study and have received several more grants moving forward. That's pretty awesome. But what I thought was interesting were the things that were different in the cement hydration. So they're not actually looking for the purpose of this study. They're not using a true cement product. They're actually using pure tricalcium silicate, so just the C3S, which is the primary, reactionary ingredient, right? So they wanted to keep it pure because the differences in clinkers from one batch to the next, from one source to the next, there's going to be impurities, the alkalis, things are going to be different. So the way to sort of eliminate as many extraneous variables as possible, they decided to go with a pure C3S. So they brought that in. They've got, clean water and a couple of additives to help with things. But they used a really high water to cement ratio because it's pure C3S. So there's nothing to slow down the reaction. There's no gypsum in there. With no gypsum to slow it down, they just had to dilute it with more water. So the water cement ratio is ridiculously high. But the thing, and the water had lime in it, by the way, because normally, you get your Portland diet extraneously. So the calcium hydroxide that, is produced by the reaction of the clinker with the water, they wanted to go ahead and infuse that in there. So again, you're slowing things down. You're keeping things moving in the right pace, the right direction, keep things on balance. So they put there's only 4 things right there, like the lime, the water, the C3S, and then maybe a couple additives. And those were also to slow down the reaction because this thing's going to take off. And so you don't want like super high heat, which isn't, going to relate to anything we're doing here on Earth. So they sent samples up to the International Space Station. And that's just like holy crap. Who would have thought doing concrete at the International Space Station? It's awesome. So
did they use the last SpaceX launch? Is that what how'd they get it up there?
No, they were using rockets that were on resupply missions.
Okay.
And so they would just get a compartment in that resupply mission. They actually had like plastic baggies that had burstable baggies inside of it. So like an individual compartments inside of a plastic bag. That way there wasn't like different air in the samples on the ground versus the samples at the ISS. Right. And so when the samples got up to the ISS, like the water would be in a little sack that was burstable inside of a bigger plastic baggie. And same thing with any other ingredients if there were separate ingredients. And so they would burst that bubble inside the plastic bag. It would allow the pure C3S to hit the water or alcohol or whatever is in there, which I'm pretty sure that was it. Pretty sure it was just the lime was in the water, and there may have been a little bit of alcohol in there to slow it down. But then you had the pure powder for the C3S, and it would mix, and they'd mix it in the baggie, and then they'd monitor it. And they would monitor. There wasn't a whole lot you could do up in space while it's inside of a baggie, but the real thing is to see the morphology when the cement crystals have been growing in outer space, right, and more importantly in a low gravity environment or a microgravity environment. So the big thing here is we got to build structures on Mars. If we're going to go to Mars, if we're going to colonize Mars, if you're going to have some kind of station on the moon or anything, you've got to be able to build things. So instead of carrying a bunch of steel or whatever, maybe you can make everything out of concrete, because you're talking about solar radiation, proof from that. So concrete's going to be good for a bunch of stuff. Insulated. So how are you, and fireproof? Anyway, everybody listen to this probably knows all those benefits.
Yeah.
So they want to see how does concrete react in a microgravity environment, and because that's what you're going to be dealing with on the moon and on Mars. And what I thought was fascinating was two things. One, the crystal growth from the C3S interaction with lime and water was identical to what you see here on Earth. So gravity did not actually change the crystals themselves. The morphology was the same. The difference was actually in the pore structure. It was much more porous, which I thought was fascinating, and it makes sense. So here's what happened. There's no gravity, which means the concrete, the weight of that concrete is not settling down on itself.
Right.
So it's not forcing the air out of itself like we do here on Earth. It's not forcing that out. So there are no bleed channels. There's no bleeding at all. There's no segregation at all. It just fills the void. And so now you've got 20% air in this thing because there's no weight to push it down and cause that bleed water to get out of there.
That's pretty awesome.
No, it was really cool. It was really cool. So what you end up with is like almost the maximum crystal length you could have when the cement hydrates, which is going to create a weak. They weren't really looking for strength here anywhere. They were really just trying to see what gravity's effect was. And it looks like the effect is there's no segregation and bleeding. So you've got this incredibly weak product because there's just the planes of weakness are innumerable. There's just air everywhere in this thing.
Yeah.
So they're going to have to be conscious of that or redesign it in some way. So they're going to continue to investigate those effects. It did reach a degree of hydration of 88%, which is good. It's really good, really encouraging to see that. But you're going to have a 20% increase in porosity. That's not going to work.
Yeah, you have to do something to curtail that.
Yeah,
Either or what do you think? Like, throw 5% or something? Or how do you think you fix the problem? Do you try to adjust for the amount of air that's in it inherently, or do you try to somehow work that out?
Well, for me, it's funny. People are going to laugh when they hear this. My first thought was, we got to put Actigel in this.
Dang right.
Well, if you thought we helped with segregation before, wait till you incorporate no gravity.
Well, it's crazy because we're the most biased people in the world when it comes to talking about the Actigel additive.
Admittedly, yeah.
Yeah, but my first thought was, okay, you need to control these nucleation sites. You need to control how this stuff is spreading. So how can you do that? Well, you have a product like ours that has dual polarity on a mineral structure, a rod-shaped mineral structure. And if that dual polarity is attracting water molecules like we suspect it is to the surface, then you're now controlling where that cement is going to have to go in order to hydrate. So if our stuff is making the structures that we see under an SCM, if it's making those structures in conjunction with the cement particles, if we're attracting that water to our surface but not absorbing it, so it's still available for the cement to hydrate, then you're going to control to some degree what level of porosity you have in that thing. I think you're going to make a denser product even in a microgravity environment, and you're going to have better results in that regard, because everything else on this thing was fine. Mm-hmm. It was just the porosity is going to be an issue. So, right. I mean, maybe fibers can come and overcome some of the strength challenges, but instead of treating the symptom, instead of treating the symptoms, how do you get to the root causes and solve it? And I think something like the Actigel product actually would fix that problem.
Right.
Yeah, okay. I've got two observations, neither of which are really educated or well thought out, but which are like most of my observations are. But first one, I think this is a perfect opportunity to have a sequel to Armageddon. Instead of an old rig crew, we send up a concrete contracting crew to the moon or Mars and let them adjust to pouring concrete in outer space. I think it'd be a great movie.
So not an rig on the spaceship. Said it's a portable plant on the
Yeah,
spaceship.
yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna shoot.
In that regard, you can still have characters. I mean, because the characters you have on an oil rig, you got the crazy guy, you got like the staunch, headstrong character, you got the romantic guy, you got all that on a concrete job too.
Oh yeah. We'll just strap some thrusters to the sides of the silo and just shoot it off in there. And my second observation, if you thought waiting on a truck was bad on Earth, wait till you got to wait on Elon Musk to shoot one off the face of the Earth to get to the planet you're on. Truck's on the way.
On the way.
Yeah. Scope out. It might be here in 4 weeks.
That's a good point.
Well, that's the whole point of mixing it on the moon, dude. So you're not waiting for
Yeah.
it on a truck.
Yeah,
Well,
metered concrete is for the moon.
Scale that.
Hey, what?
How do you scale that up?
Oh.
I mean, you're
that's
sending
a
stuff up
problem
there
for
in
Elon.
bags.
You're asking us? We're idiots.
I'm just being skeptical about this. It's great. It's super interesting. I would be just as interested in how do you scale this thing up to where you actually build something up there.
Oh man, I don't think that's gonna be that hard. As long as you have the binder. As long as you have the binder, they're gonna use local, and that's why this wasn't done using any aggregate. Because really, you really want to go the next step.
Good point.
You grab moon dust and moon rock, Mars dust and Mars rocks, and you start mixing it. So that's a whole nother level to this thing. Because I know they've done the analysis on those soils, but until you actually get it, we know how it is. You go from the lab to the field, right? Something's gonna change. So when they actually get out there and they actually try to use that local dirt and build something with it, I mean, that'll be the real test.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing that we're even thinking about something like that. So, another thing that's amazing, #segue. Uber built a new building out in San Francisco. I got this from the Concrete Products article. They did a thing on ASA and their awards ceremony that's every year at World of Concrete. Well, they highlighted two projects from the awards this past year, and one was Uber built a new building in San Francisco. And what was really cool about this was I always look for guys that we know on projects like these, and one was JJ Albanese out of San Francisco. We've worked with them before, know a couple guys out there, and we also know Central Concrete and US Concrete. They were the material suppliers on that job, and we all know Uber, so that was cool. Let's see if I can get a couple more details on this thing.
Did you ever go out there, Josh, to see Central? Their concrete lab is awesome.
Really?
Yeah, really, really good dudes, and their lab was awesome. So you know how we're building our new lab here in Maryland, moving our stuff up from Georgia and building new space. So we've been looking at new labs and seeing how to do stuff. And so you think back to guys like Central and their facility was rock solid. It was awesome.
It's awesome.
Yeah, if you look on the website or the link to the article, they have a couple pictures of the job sites, and the Uber project is a lot of just curved walls and very intricate, and it's really cool just knowing it was all shotcrete. They do so many crazy things with shotcrete nowadays. They can make it look like anything, and so that was really neat. Making things really neat is what really sold me on this next project. It was a TV set for a show called Swamp Thing. Some guys may know, but I'm like half redneck and half nerd, so I like comic book stuff. But Swamp Thing was is a DC Comics character. DC Comics does Batman and Superman and things like that. But they use shotcrete on this TV set. And another thing, and like I said before, the picture's on the link here, and it's really cool knowing this is all shotcrete. But they made a swamp out of shotcrete. So there's all these cypress trees and all this, the rocks and vegetation. Vegetation's not shotcrete, but everything else on there is. And they did 18,000 square feet of colored and hand-carved surfaces in 9 days. That's covering a lot of ground. And some guys we know again were on that project. Revolution Gunite and Clearwater Construction Group. We know those guys pretty well. We might actually have Ryan Oakes on the show here coming up. So that was really neat to see. And the pictures are really cool. And I watched the trailer for the show. The show looks halfway decent, but the sets are going to look cool.
So full disclosure, I didn't know we were going to talk about Swamp Thing today, but that was actually like my favorite movie, like cartoon movie at one point when I was a kid. I was probably like 8, 9 years old, but like Swamp Thing, I just thought that was the coolest thing. I watched that movie all the time when I was a kid. It might have even only been a show, but I had it on a VHS and I would just watch Swamp Thing all the time. So
That's cool.
Those are cool projects. They the ASA at their awards ceremony and in their magazine, the awards issue of their magazine, they have all these projects that won these awards, and they are absolutely incredible. Just they have pools and their zoos projects that go on at zoos. Construction projects like an Uber and just anything you could think of, rehabilitation projects like dams and waterways, or even building or bridge rehab. All that's done with shotcrete, and it's absolutely amazing. They make shotcrete look like absolutely anything nowadays.
I remember the first time I learned that all the rocks at zoos and everything were all shotcrete. I'll never forget. And so now, like, take the kids to play mini golf and all that, and I'm like, look at this shotcrete. Oh, look, they did a great job right here.
Yeah, I have a lot of time to look at the shotcrete stuff at mini golf or golf in general when I'm looking for my ball that I whacked off somewhere.
Yeah, I don't stay on the carpet the whole time either. All right, boys. Well, this is probably as good of a time as any to bring in our guest. Today on the show we have Ryan Betts from Argos. He's going to tell us all about what he does. A lot of interesting things that he's involved with at Argos. Going to get into some stories, which is always good. And we always knew that we'd have Ryan Ewen as our first guest. He's been a friend of all three of us for a long time. He's a great guy to go back and forth with and ask questions, and he'll pose questions to us as well. And he always has his ear to the ground, right? He's a great guy to have in your corner. So without further ado, this is our very first guest for the Ad 10 podcast, Mr. Ryan Betts.
Today we have Ryan Betts. Thank you for joining us, brother.
Good to be here, Paul.
Hey, man, how long have we been talking about doing a concrete podcast?
I lost count. It's been quite a while.
Quite a while, but we always said you'd be the first one on it, and we're happy to have you here, man. So you're still working with Argos. You've been with Argos for a long time now, and you just recently got a new position, Assistant Technical Director of Cement. Tell us a little bit about that and what that role sort of means to you and it means to Argos.
Yeah, great. Thanks for mentioning that, by the way. So the role is basically, essentially the assistant to the technical director for the cement division. It's not a very clearly defined and stated role. It's sort of anything that has to do with technical issues or anything that sort of arrives at the intersection of something technical. It can involve things like import products, ASTM, ACI, PCA, participation, customer support, customer value type functions, as well as working with our manufacturing facilities on quality and consistency.
Gotcha. Well, you had an interesting way to get here, like to this point. So some of us, we went to Middle Tennessee State and we graduated with the concrete industry management degree. But you also had like a concrete cement degree. Where was that from? How did you get it? And how in the world did you find out about it? What got you interested in getting that degree?
Well, yeah, so I have an associate's degree in the applied sciences of concrete technology. More or less, it's a 4-man's concrete industry management degree, 2 less years. But the program is less management and more running gradations and doing lab type activities and testing and learning about admixtures and aggregates and and so you really get right down to the technical stuff. The reason that I got into concrete is because I always knew what I wanted to do when I grew up. I wanted to be a welder. And so I did a lot of job shadowing, and I had a lot of welders say, find something else to do. You're gonna thank me later for it. So I found myself at 18 having no idea what to do. The then head of the program there, Bob Eller, came to my high school and was talking about the concrete technology program, and I was sitting in the front row and I was filling out my application for Alpena Community College, which is would host this program. And he said, "Look at this guy. He's halfway to a degree already. He's almost got the form filled out." And so I said, "I think I'm going to like this." But there is also some other history that I actually have family members that have also graduated with degrees in concrete. My father, my mother, my stepfather, my brother are all educated in concrete. So none of them work in the industry, though.
Well, your brother works for the Army Corps of Engineers, or he did. And I remember a story from a couple years ago. He called you and he said, "Hey, man, we're having some problems here with one of our things." And he went through this really long explanation about how he's worried. Nobody has any idea what's going on. And you just calmly replied, you go, "Yeah, that's autogeneous shrinkage." And he said, "Auto what?" He said, yeah. That's autogeneous shrinkage. He said, "Well, we just paid some consultant like $100,000 to write this report on what this is. So we'll see what he says and I'll call you back." And he called you back and he goes, "Should have just gave you $100,000 because you solved it over the phone." So that's one of my favorite stories. And in a manner of speaking, how did you determine over the phone that was autogeneous shrinkage? So what is autogeneous shrinkage and how do you diagnose that over a phone?
So just for reference, this is a U.S. Air Force project in Abilene, Texas. I've never been there. It's the facility that houses the long-range bombing fleet. So these incredibly expensive aircraft, and they don't really like when there's problems with concrete that their jets are going to be operating on, landing on, taking off from. And so they got these little hairline cracks at the corners of the slip form paving. And to me the process, and I've learned this from my years of experience in concrete, is sometimes it's better to start checking things off the list that it's not. And so after asking many questions about how they were preparing the subgrade, what does the mix design look like, what are the weather conditions, and all these other things, I essentially crossed everything off the list, and as a sort of semi-educated guess, as probably autogenous shrinkage. Add some more water to the mix and it'll be fine. And sure enough, it was.
That's a $100,000 answer, boys. Did you hear that? 100,000.
The Corps of Engineers has a crack team of experts in concrete paving, probably 12 to 14, and they were left scratching their head with this problem. So sometimes it just takes a different perspective or a different approach, and so I try to approach things that way, because usually it's the things you don't think about that are things that are become the most obvious answer.
Wait, the answer was add 10 gallons?
Add 10 gallons. Where's the cowbell?
Solves all your problems. Just flash hands, add 10 gallons. All right, so in your role, you go from doing the 2-year degree, you come in, you start working on quality for a couple different ready-mix companies, and then you jump from the ready-mix side over to the dark side, the cement team, and you work your way up to where you're at now. There's another cement type that's getting thrown around out there a lot, not as ubiquitous as slag cement. I think almost everybody has used or at least knows of slag cement, but not a lot of people are using the Portland limestone cement. So as we, go in and out of all these conferences and all these groups, and, we're working with local states with what we do, we hear a lot of talk about Portland limestone cement, and it even looks like it's getting written into legislation. So as we think of like the concrete industry as a whole, it really does seem like we're going to move into this lane of reducing the carbon footprint of the industry. And one way they think they can do that is by reducing the amount of clinker being used, and if you substitute it with lime or limestone. So you end up with this Portland limestone cement. Do you see this catching on in the next 5 years? And what is it about it that maybe the ready-mix industry doesn't know yet. Maybe the ready mix guys that are watching this right now are like, oh, I've heard of that, but I still don't understand why they're telling me to use it. Because everything I've heard sounds great. I have no idea why everybody's not using it now. Not just from the green side, but all the other benefits too. Can you tell me what's the biggest challenge? Do you see it really taking off in the next 5 years?
Well, part of your issue is you're listening to a cement guy talk about it, but no, I actually this whole thing started gaining traction in the mid 2000s, late 2000s. I was in the ready mix business at the time, and when my cement technical people were talking to me about this up and coming initiative, I thought, great, they're just going to dilute their cement. That was my perspective going into it. I've been won over to the fact that there are a lot of benefits to having high amounts of uncalcined limestone in cement, and of course that comes from the finish mill. So the clinker, gypsum, and other components are blended with limestone. We are permitted to have a maximum of 5% in traditional C150 cements, type 1, 2, 3. But this is a cement that falls under C595, which is the blended cement spec. So you'd see your type 1 in slag, 1S's, 1P's with fly ash. And again, through a lot of promotion and a lot of research and development and a lot of industry initiatives, we're starting to see that there are actually a lot of benefits to 1L cement outside of the sustainability component, which you had referenced. For instance, one DOT in particular that seemed to be very forward-thinking and on the ball with this, and I've got to give a shout-out to MDOT, the Mississippi DOT. They were doing some research on this, and actually part of Wade Davis Stadium edition was, I think it was in 2012 or somewhere in that area. They did a 1L cements, and it was part of a research project. The MMC supplied the concrete, and they were really surprised at some of the results they found, and they were a little bit confounded as to what they were seeing. And the things they were seeing in this project, because they're placing this concrete, this type 1-2 cement, this type 1L cement concrete side by side, they're seeing improvements in strength. They're seeing improvements in permeability reduction, so you're making lower permeable concrete, and they couldn't quite figure out why is that. And so there was a lot of studies done to understand why is adding additional limestone beneficial. And one of the very interesting things is that 1L cements work very well with river gravels, and it has to do with the paste aggregate bond, which is traditionally not very good quality with river gravels because they're smooth, they're round. And so this 1L cement, actually higher amounts of limestone, help to stabilize the ettringite that is formed from cement hydration and reduce the amount of micro cracking at that interfacial transition zone, so that area between the surface of an aggregate particle and the paste. And so it hence made a better bond, which made for better compressive strength. So there are, again, a lot of benefits to 1L cement, and so to me it's a win-win for all industries that this product will move forward. And I believe in the next 5 years you're going to see a very large amount of concrete being produced with 1L cements.
I do have one question. You're talking about how it works well with River Rock, and there's other benefits tied to it. But is the 1L cement, do you see that as, at least initially, being a almost like a regional product where it'll take off in some regions first before it becomes adopted nationwide? And if so, where are you kind of targeting your efforts to?
That's a great question. So, yeah, I mean, we're seeing success regionally in some areas. Florida has become a very substantial market for 1L, and so it's being very widely used in Florida. Once the DOT had approval, but I think that in the Southeast you're going to see a lot of states outside of Georgia, which we're still working with, but Alabama, is another one where there's the sort of the vertical integration component of the business that you're going to see a lot more of it. Limestone cements actually have been used in places like, I believe, Colorado, some of the states that are ASTM governed states as opposed to AASHTO, because they've been being used for decades for traditional concrete, but they've been specified under the 1157 specification, which is a performance-based specification, as opposed to C595 or C150, which is a very prescriptive type of specification. So yeah, I definitely see there will be some regional things, and there are advantages in certain areas over other areas. In the South, you have a lot less of the detriment of freeze thaw, type of action, de-icer scaling type stuff, where you would have to take some pretty big considerations into limiting your supplementary cementitious material. So you can still load up your slags and your fly ashes with it in the South. In other places, I think they're going to take a little more cautious approach and try to understand the effects of the cement, because technically it is a blended cement, and obviously it's not the traditional blended cement. Limestone is not a pozzolan. It's not a cementitious material, but we sort of treat it that way by putting it in the 595 spec.
So is it going to completely take somebody's type 1-2 away, or are they going to have a separate silo for the 1L cement?
Well, the idea is that it's sort of a plug and play solution, and we've been able to. The vast majority of the DOTs in the U.S. have essentially allowed concrete producers to design mixes with 1L cement exactly the same way they would with the type 1, type 2 cement. So in that, and using the same amount of replacement for fly ash, slags, and other SCMs. And so that's the idea, is that it can take the place of your type 1-2 cement. And obviously there are always hurdles as far as acceptance within the specifying community. There are still engineers that think fly ash is bad and evil. To this day, there are still some holdouts. So, but there will be a very large, widespread acceptance of this product and use of this product, I believe, in the very near future.
Very interesting. Yeah, I kind of see the same thing when I'm just looking at the landscape as a whole, that it will take off. It just takes time. It's a very conservative industry, and we face that. I mean, me and my guys here, we face that all the time, trying to introduce a new technology to somebody in such a conservative industry. It takes years and years and years to get people to adopt it and to accept it. And one of the things that we're working on right now, and you've been involved with us since the beginning, is the idea of replacing all your natural sand with manufactured sand and using additives to mask all of those issues, to take care of the finishability and the pumpability problems, and instead make a cheaper concrete with local materials. And even with that being the case, we run into obstacles like crazy. The development cycle for these things like crazy. Do you see the same thing when you're developing new cements like the Portland limestone cement? Is it just pure resistance, or is it they just aren't hearing the right things that they need to hear? Because it all sounds great to me. I can't believe it's taken this long.
Well, I think it speaks to the fundamental problems that we face in business, which is we come up with great ideas of great products all the time, but a lot of times they require capital investment. And so the people that run our businesses say, go get the business and then we'll invest. And we say, well, we need the business, we need to invest and then go after the business. We can't go tell people about how great product X, Y, or Z is for them to say, great, we want that. And then we say, well, hold on a minute. We still got to clear all the CapEx hurdles and get this thing going. So in 5 years, we can probably get you what you want. So we're in a fairly, like you said, a risk-adverse industry, and when it comes down to it, we don't like for the most part, the traditional components of our industry, cement, ready mix, even engineers, they don't like to make changes until they're beneficial to them. And so, whereas in other more dynamic industries, they'll redo their business model, they'll destroy their current product with a new product and walk away from it and say, eventually this is going to be very substantial and beneficial to us. And so it's just a little different mentality.
I mean, I understand that, but doesn't liability play a factor in this? Because we're talking about construction here.
It always does. It always does. If you look at alternative cements and high limestone cements in places like Europe or South America, Asia, it's very widespread. But yeah, again, that whole liability factor comes into play because of sort of the way that things are in the States. Even in Canada, they've been using limestone cements very widely for more than a decade. So they've been way ahead of us on that curve.
Give us a good story, man, from all your days working QC and tech services across the ready mix and the cement side. Give us maybe what is your kind of favorite, like super wildest thing that you've seen and been a part of.
I've been a part of so many things. Some that I didn't think were that funny or that interesting or great initially, and then some that I realized that this is, really funny and we could laugh about it. But I would say that maybe I don't have one specific story, but a couple of examples of something that I know that everybody who produces concrete experiences, and that's the ill effects of bad testing. And I know everybody's got their stories, and I've got some pretty good ones. I think we had talked about a while ago about when I first started in ready mix in Indiana, the DOT, as part of this whole everybody's going to metric initiative, was pushed down through the federal government and then very quickly reversed. There were a lot of projects that were let in metric, and it caused a lot of problems. And so because everybody wanted to figure things out in cubic yards and in feet, and then they would have to go back and convert it into meters. And one day I was on a job site, got called out to a job site because we were having problems meeting the air content requirement for some concrete being supplied for this project. And I got out there and I went to go see the state testing guy and said, "Hey, what's the problem?" And he said, "Well, after I convert this air from imperial to metric, you're out of spec." And I said, "What? What are you talking about?" He said, "Yeah, you got to convert it. We have to convert all our units, and so I'm converting imperial percent air to metric percent air." And I said, "Percent doesn't have any units." We had to do a little education session in that, and go through some examples that you can have 100 of anything, and you give somebody one of anything. It doesn't matter what you label it as. It's 1%. So yeah, that was an interesting one. Another project I had, it was a DOT project, and I go out to this job site, and this was when self-consolidating concrete was just first coming around, and this old timer, I'm watching him run slump on a 3-inch slump concrete, and he's got the slump cone inverted, and he takes really great care to do his 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, and he's got the cone upside down. And I'm watching him and going, where is this going? What is he going to do? He picks it up, and because it wouldn't flow out of the narrow end of the slump cone, he starts shaking it, and he started building up something, and he sets the cone down and measures. He goes, "Oh man, that's a 3 3/4. You're barely in spec, buddy." And I said, you're running that test wrong. And he said, "This is the way I've been running it for 20 years, and you can't tell me any different." And I said, "Okay, well then don't tell me that any concrete's going to be rejected, because I will raise issue with it." Never had any problems. So apparently he figured out a way to run an inverted slump test that, at least from my standpoint, didn't cause any problems, and must have given him something that was within specification. But yeah, it's unbelievable, some of the things that you come across out there.
Holy cow. Yeah, one of my favorite lessons I ever learned, one of the stories, was the day that I learned what you do in the concrete lab doesn't always translate into the field. And when I was working with Lafarge, we had made this really special mix, so super high dense, like zero permeability, making this big slab for a nuclear power plant. So it was almost like a mass pour. That's how thick this slab was. And we're out there at 2 o'clock in the morning, and it's day one, and it is not going well. They have already poured like 200 yards by the time I showed up, and the guy's just on fire. And he came over to me, and there I am with my clipboard and white hard hat and shiny boots, because I'm a lab guy and not a field guy at that time. And he comes over and he starts yelling at me. He goes, You're the reason this mix is terrible. I was like, I don't think so, but well, let's talk about it. I'm scared to death. I'm probably like 23 years old. I don't know anything. And I think I know things, but I really don't know anything. And he comes up and he says, well, this mix isn't right at all. The slump's wrong, the air's wrong, everything's wrong. And I had my little clipboard and I looked down and I said, well, according to my spreadsheet, this would all be right. And he smacks that spreadsheet out of my hand and he says, I don't give a dang about your spreadsheet. Fix my concrete. So we had to have some emergency fixing there on the site, went back to the lab that day, made the corrections in the lab that would then translate into the field. And it was crazy because in the lab, I was getting a 9-inch slump. But you take that same design out in the field, and it was a 5-inch slump. So, Ryan, I don't know, in your experience, are there any other things like that where you spent, because you spent a decent bit of time in the lab. So are there other things like that you thought, you'd hit home runs in the lab, but they just never translated in the field?
Yes. And it was a similar type of experience. And you and I used to work for the same company, Lafarge, Ready Mix, and value-added concrete products were very, very heavily promoted. And we had a project that was a freezer facility. They did not want to shut the freezer down, but they needed to replace about 60 yards of concrete slab. And so we said, great, we know exactly what we can do for that. It's got to set very fast because it's going to be 32 degrees or 31 degrees in this freezer. So, there was really no horizon given if they're going to raise the temperature or, at any point. So you got to get a lot of strength very quickly. So we went to work and made this just god-awful, nasty mix, and you make cylinders, and we put them in our deep freezer we have in our lab, and sure enough, man, we're getting strengths like you wouldn't believe. And so game time, it comes to the day to do this. We decide to supply it from a plant that is about a 35-minute drive from the project, and it's also about 95 degrees. This stuff is loaded with Type 3 cement. Almost no water, and it's all plasticizer. It's got non-chloride accelerator in it. And by the time I got to the job, I had buckets of high-range water reducer, and I am just like bucket brigade. Give me another bucket. Throwing it in, this concrete is not responding. It's setting up, like as I'm watching it, I'm dumping plasticizer, can't get it, add some water. And so I call our quality manager and I said, you need to bring some sugar, like a lot of sugar out here right now. We need to kill this concrete. We're going to lose this drum. And he said, well, I got to stop at the gas station. I said, I don't know which one you're talking about. I'm sending these 2 trucks over there right now. They couldn't even pump this stuff. It was awful. And I said, they're going to be in the parking lot. Get out there and dump as much sugar as you can in it. Long story short, we were 2 drums down, concrete, 8 yards of concrete set up, solid as all get out. I think those drums are actually still sitting on one of our yards somewhere. And that's when I realized, you got to consider the logistics of concrete, of delivering and placing concrete, just as much as you need to consider the technical aspects of a mix's performance, right? You got to consider how long it's going to be take to be delivered, and how it's going to be placed, and all that kind of stuff, and factor in some sort of safety factor, because that wasn't a good day.
Real quick story I got. Paul, you know where I grew up. You've been down there, and you know how far away it is from everything. So they were doing some little residential project down there one time, and the local, the closest concrete company was 30 to 45 minutes away. That was the nearest plant. And so they sent a truck down there. They had sent trucks. It was a pretty big job. And they'd sent a couple trucks down there, and one truck went down there and got close to the job and broke down. Drum quit spinning, and by the time they got anything down there to even work on the truck or try to get the truck out of there, concrete had already set up in the drum. They had to bring a crane in, pick the drum off, and set it off in the weeds on the side of the road and haul the truck away. Well, a few days later, somebody made a stencil with NASA. They made it look just like the NASA letters. And they came up there under the cover of darkness and spray painted NASA on the side of this big white drum, and it got a lot of attention in that little small town back home.
Speaking of the transportation challenges, and you got to be thinking about those kind of factors, did you see the report that just got released about asking ASTM to look at the C94 and change it in terms of like concrete age? Because right now, 90 minutes, if concrete's older than 90 minutes, it's supposed to be rejected. And they're saying, look, according to all this work we did, you can go up to 150 minutes, and the concrete is just the same, if not better, in these tests than they were at 90 minutes. Have you seen that report yet?
Yeah, I've been participating in some of the committees and in some of the incredibly spirited debates that are happening. So the NRMCA is now affiliated with the Portland Cement Association, and so we have a lot of overlap. So my thought on it when I initially heard this initiative, and they've been trying to push this for quite a while now, and it keeps getting struck down with mountains of negatives. The idea is that some producers want the flexibility to be able to extend the supply or the time that they can batch, deliver, and place concrete beyond the 90 minutes specified in C94. Others do not, and it's not. These two sides are very passionate. They both have very great arguments. Obviously, the ones who want essentially to dictate to the contractor the amount of time that they have to place the concrete from the time it's batched see it as a means of reducing rejected loads. When it hits 90 minutes plus 1 second, get it out of here. And their argument is we can design mixes that can last for hours and still meet all the other requirements. The people who do not want the 90 minutes removed and do not want the responsibility of it being added are the people who seem to have been burned many times over something related to the contractor asking for 100 yards an hour, and they are pouring 30 yards an hour, and you have trucks stacked up on the site, and they want the ability to go back and say, you took responsibility for that concrete after it reached 90 minutes, and whatever disaster was caused by it, because in theory, we were always on projects and making sure we're doing our quality stuff, but the reality of it is that concrete's poured all the time without QA involved, because it's just the nature of the business. And so both sides make a very compelling argument. I do not believe it will pass. I just can't see where the objections are just not being addressed. They've kind of eliminated a few as non-persuasive as participated in ASTM, and you may have had your feelings hurt if you submitted a proposed ballot and somebody said, well, I'm gonna convince everybody that you're not persuasive, and then they eliminate it. But the issue is that there doesn't seem to be enough juice going forward to push it. So again, I don't know what the right answer is. There's compelling arguments to both sides.
Yeah, I hadn't heard the other side. That was interesting. So it's a liability thing again. We're coming back to liability on another issue, and that's really
worked in ready mix. You know that communications, because you have dozens of jobs, communication isn't always the most solid. Sometimes projects are done without QA ever being involved in sales and in the plant, and so again, I think I tend to lean more towards that side of 90 minutes. You know, there already is language in there allowing for some sort of a agreed upon change to the time limit between the purchaser and the supplier, and to me that's really where concrete producers should be pushing. They should be submitting mixes if they want 2 hours, and saying in their submittal saying we're going to have 2 hours, and if you have any reason that you don't want that, then reject it, and we'll address it, type of thing.
Yeah, the paper that I saw was a continuation of the work that's been going on for about 6 years, and so it's just the latest report. And it did admit that. It admitted that, the way the ACI 318 is set up right now is that if you want more than 90 minutes, you just have to agree to it ahead of time. Don't say it the day of the job that, oh, this concrete's fine, even though it's 95, 100 minutes sold. And I was looking at the data. It was interesting because it's like an official report. This university put together this nice long report, and the data, you could just tell it was concrete data. Like, it wasn't this perfectly near trend on everything. It was kind of up and down, and you just had to say, it's a little up and down, but it's concrete. That looks good. Let's roll.
How many times have you generated a bunch of data and created a scatter plot and drawn a straight line through it and say, there's the trend curve, and they're like, yeah, but it's up here, it's down there, and the trend curve, it's all up to the interpretation.
Absolutely. And around here, we put positive spin on stuff.
There you go.
I had a good story for you, Ryan, and the guys here. So we're talking about that manufacturer sand thing, and you helped us, Ryan, recently trying to come up with ideas of how to not make it stick in the bins. And so we're listening and fielding ideas from you and some other colleagues out there, and I'm not going to bring up the guy's name or the company he's with or who he was with when this happened, but he gave me a great solution, told me what he used to do back in the day. So back in the day, up in Huntsville, Alabama, where it routinely gets 100 degrees, Joey Bell, you down there in Nashville, and it gets really hot. The sand's full of moisture, the manufactured sand is, and it gets in the bottom of the bin, it sticks as it starts to heat up, sticks to the sides of the bin. And if they had sand in there in the summer on a Friday and they were going to be down for the weekend, it was going to be packed hard as a rock where the water is just leached out and it's just cooked to the sides of the bin. On Monday, it's going to be a horrible day. So what they would do, this is how they solved that issue. What they would do is on Sunday, a pack of them would get together and they stroll out to the plant. They take a couple of cases of beer and their shotguns, and they would take turns climbing up on the bin and blasting the sand off the bins with buckshot.
That's wonderful.
And it worked, but I haven't recommended anybody yet.
Well, I get it. That's the way they used to, and maybe in some cases still do, knock buildup off of the dolomite brick in a cement kiln. We actually, at our facility in Atlanta, which is a decommissioned cement plant, there's like a pallet full of 8-gauge shotgun shells. I couldn't even imagine shooting that thing, but that's what they used to go in when they would cycle the kiln down, and because they had buildup, they would just go in there and start blasting stuff off. So
there's no amount of hearing protection that could save you from that.
Goodness, no. Talk about the good old boys in concrete. There's a lot of them.
I'm trying to think. Any other thing you wanted to talk about, Ryan? Anything else that was on your mind or on your chest, or like to say?
Well, actually,
millions.
Another question that I had was something that came up that I thought about. Any of you guys ever do any good celebrity stories in concrete?
Like actual celebrities or concrete celebrities?
No, actual celebrity. Nobody cares about concrete celebrities.
Yeah, I was about to say I met Gary Knight one time.
Oh yeah, well he's the grand wizard, Gandalf the Great of our industry. So I need to have lunch with him at some point. He's a great dude. Lives down the road from me. But I have one, and I'm going to name the celebrity. You can blurt it out if you want. But I don't know if you ever heard of a guy named John Rich.
Oh yeah,
Big and Rich fame.
Yeah.
The Concrete Cowboys, or Country Music Mafia, or whatever they were called. So he built a massive house, a mansion in West Nashville, when I was there working in Ready Mix, and he wanted everything to be concrete. He had self-consolidating concrete walls around his entire compound that was colored and textured concrete. We were supplying the concrete to. He had concrete floors where he wanted mirrors and glass and stuff embedded into it and then polished so you could see it. He had custom concrete. I helped a customer of ours do custom concrete windowsills. So everything was, and then ultimately he wanted to be able to land his helicopter on top of this thing when it was said and done. It was unbelievable. And the project was just a cluster from day one because it was very ambitious. He was always threatening to fire everybody and I'm going to get rid of the whole lot of you. And one time my admixture supplier, a guy who I went to concrete college with, he's no longer in the admixture business. He's selling slag or other things, but he had to get called into this meeting because the self-consolidating concrete was just not quite working out the way they were wanting it to. And he said there's this little job trailer on site, and it's packed full of people. He says probably 15 people, and this thing can probably really reasonably fit about 10. And he said, I see this homeless guy walking up to the trailer off the streets, and I'm like, he was whole ratty jeans and had looked like he hadn't showered in like months, type of thing. And the guy walks up to the door and he opens the door and he said, I'm the last guy in, so I'm standing at the door because there's no other place to go. And I said, whoa, excuse me, sir. This is a private meeting. And he said, my ass, it's a private meeting. I'm John Rich. And he said, pardon me, sir, I will give you my spot. I'm out of here. And he just got in his car and drove off, never even attended the meeting. He got his butt chewed by John Rich. He looked like he was a homeless dude off the streets of West Nashville. Crazy.
Yeah,
that's called a hipster. Right?
Yeah, we have those. We got a bunch of those.
Yeah.
Hey, Joey, you remember that time we were out there on an Argacast pile job in California, and instead of working, old boy set up a grill?
Yeah, that was I think wasn't he like part of QC or something like that? He like legit worked on the job, and he had a title. But come middle of the day, yeah, he just pitched this canopy right off the back of his truck, drug a grill out, and they would grill every day for lunch. Like all the Hispanic boys would come in there, and it smelled phenomenal throughout the entire job site. But they would grill every day for lunch. Yeah, that was pretty awesome.
Well, here's a PSA. There aren't a lot of problems on a job site as a QA guy at Ready Mix that can't be solved with a sack full of biscuits.
All right, man.
Right.
Ryan Betts, appreciate you hanging out with us today, brother.
Pleasure. Let me know when you want me to come back.
Will do, man. Will do.
Always welcome.
Absolutely. Friend of the pod, Ryan Betts.
Yeah. Automatic friend of the podcast.
See you, man.
See ya.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that'll do it for episode 1. We want to thank Ryan Betts again for coming on with us, talking shop, telling some great stories, and we hope you all enjoyed it. Also note that the news articles that we talked about at the beginning of the show, those links will be posted in the show notes in case you want to go follow up on any of the projects that Joey was talking about. The Concrete in Space article by Penn State University that Paul was talking about, and the ACI convention information that I was talking about. So again, all of that will be available on the show notes. One final last thanks to Ryan Betts, and we hope to be able to talk to him again on this podcast in the near future. And be on the lookout for episode 2 coming soon.